Perspective Shift is brought to you by fdailycoaching.com. If you're seeking assistance to help navigate you through a difficult time or feel challenged to reach your full potential, Frank Daly can guide you to a perspective that will allow you to utilize your imagination and experience a more fulfilling and satisfying life. Frank has been working with people for over 20 years as a coach, helping them understand the power they have to transform their lives.
How we doing today?
Great, Frank. Good to see you. Welcome to Perspective Shift, all.
Yes, all.
Back for another round.
Right on.
So, Frank, who are we diving into today?
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yes, this has been a repeated request from a few different listeners, and so we figured it would be kind of a perfect time to jump into this gentleman.
Yeah, and I really like this guy. I've listened to him for years.
Yeah.
He's one of the I have a handful of people, probably more, but that I can just simply listen to and not listen to the actual words, and he put me in a state. He's very calm. He actually he's a walking meditation.
Yeah.
So a lot of people will teach meditation, go sit down and close your eyes, do breathing. He actually is living his meditation. You could see he actually lives his life that way. And I find that just listen to him puts me into a state. Even if I don't pay attention to the words, I fall into this place, and that's why he's one of the people I love to listen to, even if I'm not paying attention.
That is so well said.
Yeah.
He is that type of individual.
Karen never lets me get away with that, but
but Thich will.
Thich will, yeah. Ty will. Yeah. He's also known as Ty by his students.
Yes, yeah, great point. No, you're absolutely right. It's the type of thing. There's certain people, individuals, when you're just merely in their presence, you can feel that peace.
Yeah.
And Thich is one of those gentlemen when he's speaking, you fall into that place of oneness.
Yeah.
And it's I know what you mean about it. Like you can just put them on, and it's like a state of meditation.
Yeah, because his whole philosophy is bringing the mind back to the body, so it brings you to a present moment. So when you're aware of the body, because he's even been asked in the past, like when he gets frustrated in a certain situation that would frustrate anybody, what does he do? He goes back to his breathing.
Yeah.
So when you put your attention, even if you notice, like I've noticed this too, like if I'm sitting there and a situation comes up and I could feel frustrated, all of a sudden I'm now in the place where I'm noticing the frustration, not noticing trying to fix it. And all of a sudden, it starts to slow it down. It's like it's a practice, if you will, or a conditioning that you get back into. You get into this natural state where you start to notice how you're feeling, and don't try to like tell a story of, well, I'm feeling this way because the plane is late.
Yeah.
No, I just like, oh, wow, all right, I'm a little frustrated right now. It's interesting. And you just kind of calm into it. All of a sudden, the frustration starts to dissipate like a cloud in the sky as it's constantly moving, changing shape, and then boom, that cloud that you were looking at a minute ago was completely gone. It's another cloud to replace it. It's the problem. No, it's not a problem. It's just letting it go. And we can all do this as we're living our life, not just sitting on the couch with our eyes closed or in some ashram with nobody around us. Knocking those things, by all means, they prepare you for it. But once we start to get to a place where we can take it to the streets, as they say, you'll start to see your world change. Yeah, become that change. So
one of the cool things that I read about when I was researching him this last week was they call him the father of mindfulness, and I thought that was a perfect given name for him, because that's truly what Thich's all about.
Yeah, So he got into this work, I believe, like around 7 years old. He was born in 1926, I believe.
Yeah, something early.
And about 7 years old, he got into it. He's from Vietnam.
Yep.
And when he really hit the world scene, it was during the Vietnam War. He came out and spoke against it for obvious reasons. And, even Martin Luther King got involved with him. Yeah. And he actually, I think Martin Luther King, if I'm not mistaken, nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Correct. I thought that was super cool when I read that.
Yeah, so there was a lot of change in the world at that time. So Martin Luther King was coming at it from one angle, Ty was coming at it from a different angle. But you see this emergence of people at that time, one not better than the other, just different, handling it differently, all appropriate to the positions that they were in. And it's just, as I grow stronger in my solitude, if you will, or my spirituality, I find myself being attracted to this type of method of walking meditation and just calmness. And when I step out of it, which I do every day, I notice it. And it's kind of like, it's almost like, why do I keep putting those shoes on that I know don't fit and I don't even like them?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a habit of putting those shoes on. I'm like, okay, now instead of me forcing myself because, hey, I'm going to put the shoes on. Why? Because everyone in my neighborhood's wearing them. Yeah. Like, no, it's no longer the case anymore.
It's funny how we act like just because everybody else is doing something, it's considered AKA normal.
Yeah. And, it's part of the story, though. We all go through it. It's about these stages of life and these replications of situations, these fractals, these patterns. We're starting to recognize them. And I'm not saying one pattern is better than the other, but I recognize when the interference pattern comes in opposed to a pattern that is correlating with other patterns. So it's actually amplifying and going bigger in a direction. It's no longer interfering. It's collaborating. And so, yeah, you want to continue in the collaborative field, not into the interference field. And when you get to this point, letting go of everything, having preferences, like I told you earlier. It's like if I go someplace and they say, would you rather have pizza or hamburger? I'm like, I'll take the hamburger. And they come back, I'm like, I'm so sorry, there's no more hamburgers. I'm like, well, I'll take the pizza. No, nothing big, I'm not going to get all bent out of shape, but I did have a preference for the hamburger. But it was met by the second preference by the pizza, If they said they were out of that, I would have lost my shit. But, but
I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
So Thich, so another thing that we'll mention about him is, so a couple things I wrote down was he's an activist, he's an author, he's a poet, he's a teacher, and then of course a Buddhist monk.
Yeah, he's written over 100 books.
Yeah. Just for background for people, like this has been a lifestyle, for Thich, since very early on.
Yeah, I think 7 years old is when so he's pretty young.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's actually been his life, and
he was exiled too from Vietnam.
Yeah, so he had opened up. Yeah, he ended up in France.
Is that where he went?
With his school, yeah.
See, that's cool.
Yeah. So I like a lot of obviously the Dalai Lama was exiled. Yeah. Out of his homeland, but the story keeps going, and they don't hold animosity. One of the clips we're going to show you today, I think we have two great clips today. Mm-hmm. Well, he'll tell his story, and I find it to be chilling and enlightening at the same time, the story. So, but
I love it.
Yeah.
Let's dive right into him.
You know how to generate energy of mindfulness and concentration, and you are strong enough to go home to yourself, to recognize the pain in yourself and listen to it and transform it. Hello, my little pain. Hello, my little anger. I know you are there. I'm home to take care of you. I do not want to cover you up with consumption anymore. We consume not because we need to consume. We eat, we watch television, we have a conversation, not because we need to do them, but because we don't want to go home and touch the suffering inside. So even if the television program is not interesting enough, we do not have the courage to turn it off because we are afraid that we have to get in touch with the suffering. So the practice of mindful breathing, the practice of mindful walking can help generate that energy of mindfulness so that we can go home to us, recognize and embrace our pain and heal. That is the teaching of the Buddha. The basic practice is mindful breathing, mindful walking. And if we are a beginner in the practice, we can also rely on the collective energy of mindfulness generated by the Sangha. You sit among your brothers and sisters in the practice. You allow yourself to be embraced like a drop of water allowed herself to be embraced and transported by the river. Dear brothers, dear sisters, here is my pain, here is my despair. Please help, recognize, embrace it. Alone, my mindfulness and concentration is not strong enough for me to do that. So that is why practicing with the Sangha is very important when your mindfulness is not solid enough. And that is why taking refuge in the Sangha is not a declaration of faith, it is a practice. You belong to a Sangha. You know how to make good use of the collective energy of mindfulness in order to embrace your pain and sorrow. And those of us who know that you have pain and sorrow, we sit there, we breathe, and we help embrace your pain and sorrow, because you are a Dharma sister, a Dharma brother to us. So when the pain manifests as a source of energy, a block of energy, a good practitioner begin to recognize, begin to practice mindful breathing, mindful walking, to generate the second source of energy. That is the energy of mindfulness and concentration. And with that second source of energy, the practitioner recognizes the first source of energy, pain, sorrow, fear. My dear little fear, I know you are there. I will not run away. I am back to take care of you. That is the seventh exercise. Recognizing the painful feeling, the painful emotion. And the eighth is to embrace. Because you have enough of that energy to embrace the pain, the sorrow. When a mother hears the cries of the baby, she put anything she's holding down. She goes to the baby's room and pick the baby up and hold the baby like this tenderly. So as a practitioner, we do exactly the same thing. The pain, the sorrow in us is our baby. We should not try to run away from it. We have to be there for our baby.
That was really well said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that clip. Couple things I wrote down, during that clip that I wanted to share was he touches on covering up the pain with consumption. And that is something we all do and cannot deny.
I did it yesterday.
Well,
No, I'm not even joking.
Whether that's television, whether it's movies, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's food, whether it's sex, we consume to cover up our emotions.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, it's like all these things, eating, television, sex.
Yeah.
It's not that we ought not to do it. It's when we're doing it, what's it tied to. And when I said I did yesterday, I'm being serious. Like, I didn't feel good at all yesterday. Mm-hmm. And I'm not used to not feeling good, So what I did is I sat on the couch, woke up in the morning, did a little meditation. And then I'm like, okay, physically, I'm not going to go to the gym. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit here. So all of a sudden, I put the TV on. And I lost myself in these TV shows. They have a good show, by the way. I think it's called The Tunnel.
Nice.
But I realized it wasn't until I turned it off and went back into feeling my body. Because when I turned it off or an episode would change, I get up to do something, I felt worse. Because I was distracted. I was purposely distracting myself from the pain in my body rather than dealing with it. Until I actually dealt with it, it started soothing and getting better. And I noticed that. And I was trying to distract myself from that. And it didn't work, Eventually I had to deal with it.
Yeah.
So, and it's, again, like, we're not saying don't eat, don't have sex, don't watch TV. It's, if you're drinking, is it celebratory, or you're trying to forget?
Correct.
Are you having sex because you're trying to become one with somebody, or you're expressing your oneness with somebody?
Yep.
Are you eating because you want to eat the food from the earth, or are you trying to distract yourself or nail something? There's distinct differences here between the two. You just have to recognize
And
it.
we all inherently know this. If we were to sit back and ask ourselves and be truthful, we know. It's just one of those feelings where you're like, huh.
Yeah.
It's things like this that bring attention to that, because we do it unconsciously. Oh, I'm just hungry, I need a snack, or I just I gotta let go, I gotta forget, I gotta go get a drink, whatever.
Yeah.
And so we kind of normalize it, justify it, and roll around in our heads as if I deserve this, and that's how we get lost, that's how we get distracted.
Yeah, and we guess what? It's funny. We notice it when we're like, oh shit, I gotta lose weight, or I gotta slow down drinking.
Yeah.
And you realize, well, it's not that you have to lose weight. It's not that you have to slow down drinking. You have to deal with the issues that you're trying to suppress.
Yep.
Because even if you slow down the drinking, you're gonna substitute it for some other
Avenue.
habit.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna, and it's still gonna be a bad one. Although, like, it might be better than drinking, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're doing that, all of a sudden now I'm going to the gym 5 times a day.
I was just going to say, people often with addictions, they'll replace an addiction with working out.
With another addiction.
Well, yeah, with another addiction.
Yeah, like working out should be an expression of your body, not because my body's not good enough. Mm-hmm. 2 different distinct avenues there. So yeah, coming to the understanding, because I've done that in the past. I've replaced one addiction for the next addiction, and one because society allowed it.
Correct.
And so, like, okay, not that, like, I didn't really have any, knock on wood, I didn't really have any bad addictions in the cycle of what humans would look at as negative.
Totally.
Like, but I've overworked out before. I've overworked before.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean, gone beyond the point in which I actually wanted to do it. And then whatever I was doing, whether it was in the gym or in business, I was just hurting the business and I was hurting my body. I wasn't really learning anything. Although I learned I was tenacious and could let go at some point.
You bring up a very, very important point, though. There are certain addictions and certain habits that are, at least our Western culture, tolerate, express as normal, don't think it's bad, whether that's, overeating in food. Here in America, everybody's overweight. Oh, everyone's overweight. Oh, the food's shitty. Oh, and we kind of act as if that's that, like, in my opinion, that's one of the hardest things to kick, because society normalizes it.
Well,
Overeating, eat whatever you want, unhealthy food patterns, all that type of stuff is very normalized by our culture.
Well, we're starting to address it now, because one of the effects of overeating is diabetes. So right now, diabetes and heart disease.
But, like, even flipping the script, like, overwork, burnout, this whole idea we normalize that in Western culture.
Yeah, we have. But you notice we're starting to address it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to look at, like, so we have to be careful, again, like how we look at it. So if you look at somebody like Elon Musk,
mm-hmm.
I can't, if he's working 80, 90 hours a week, I can't tell if he's overworking or he's just in love with what he does. It's not for me to say. He himself will know that. So a lot of times people like to look at, like, well, he's overworking, he's running 5 businesses. I'm like, he's got to do something with his time. Maybe he's enjoying it. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I'm not here to say that, but I know when I lose enjoyment in something, and it usually what takes over is I have to, mm-hmm. rather than I want to, or I'm enjoying it. So when I'm in a state of peace and love, I express my work, whatever it is, or I might just be sitting on the couch. It tends to rarely be like that way for me, but there were times where I had to do this, and I let people know. Oh yeah, I worked 60 hours this week, and then in one business, and then the other one. I'm like, and people probably look at me as, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
You're a nutbag. And what was funny is, like, had not really show for it. no one know the difference, right?
But we run ourselves into the ground that way.
Yeah, and all what happens is people will take advantage of you. Then, like, oh shit, that guy will do anything. Okay, I'll make him feel bad and do that.
Yeah.
So we become enslaved by that type of stuff. But now, I probably work more hours in the understanding of work, but actually enjoy it. I do get days where I get caught up in stuff and I put too much on my plate, but I know how to back off. For the majority part, my energy stays good because I'm enjoying it. It's now expressive of my being, not I have to do it in order to fortify my being, in order to validate my being. Because before I was trying to validate.
Yeah.
And that didn't work.
Well, that also is a good segue to what else that Thich was talking about in this specific clip, which he brings up the mindful breathing. He brings up the mindful walking. And when you are mindful, when you are in that moment, like you're talking about, work tends to flow. Or, it's not doing it for a sense of validation. You're doing it because, again, like you said, it's something you love. And so when we're mindful during these activities, we can enjoy them, we can love them, they can be great experiences. It's really when we go unconscious to them, that they're deemed or seem to be a problem.
Yeah, because now they so when you're on the right side of it, making love to your partner is an expression of love. But a lot of times people get infatuated with sex because in the moment of having sex, when you're orgasming, you actually become one. But what happens is once you finish, you feel separate again. But when you express yourself, and I've experienced this, when you express yourself in love, and even after the act is done, you still feel as one. There is no separation. One way there is separation, and separation is just this weird, gooky, guilty feeling. I don't like it. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden then okay, this is where absence comes in. I'm like, well, that doesn't work either. Tell your wife, I don't like the way I feel after sex. We're not having it anymore. You'll be divorced in a heartbeat. Well, you're approaching it differently. You're approaching your wife or whoever you're with. If your partner, you're approaching your partner as as an object, and looking at them. Okay, they have something that could create gratification for me, and you look at the sandwich the same way. But when you look at the sandwich and you as one, eating the sandwich becomes the act or the art or the expression of how you feel. So that's the difference, is when you bring yourself, like Ty says, bring yourself back to your body, and then you start to express the way you live in the outside world. All of a sudden, okay, he's eating, he's watching TV, he's having sex, but you can't look at the acts anymore is it good or bad, because it's a different motivation, a different intention behind it now. Doesn't mean we stop doing it. It's the intention, the delivery, behind it is completely different when you come back to the body. You still do those things, but you do it now out of expressiveness of love, not trying to smash or hide your hate. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the beauty of it.
Well said. That's why that's what we do, is we consume. We're taught to chase these pleasures. We're taught that these desires are all going to bring us happiness, and that's what I loved about this clip was, oh, you're not feeling happy, or oh, you're not feeling good. You just need to earn more. You just need to buy more. You just need to do that. That's what our culture has been taught. Yeah. And then we do that, right? We're like, oh, I gotta get that house. I gotta get that job. I gotta get this wife, whatever. And then you're like, wait a second, you get it, and then you're not happy, and you're right back where you were. And so we have to go through this cycle or cycles of being disappointed and realizing, hey, I thought this is what I want, but I didn't, in order to realize that consumption is not the answer. We're not going to, eat, screw our way into happiness, it's not going to happen. This is what we're taught.
That's what my 80s and 90s were all about, screwing my waist in.
No, but that's what everybody's going through. Everybody's feeling like, God, they're just trying to hide this pain. I got to drink it away, I got to smoke it away. All this type of stuff, if we're just kind of shown hey, look, it's not necessarily like that. I get what you're feeling, but there's more to this. We don't have that, direction early on, or at least I didn't. Yeah. And so you have to go through these different cycles in order to realize, hey, look, this consumption is not the answer.
Yeah. And guess what? We said this, me and Mike talked about this earlier on different podcasts. So I'm going to say it again. Human beings were great at pattern recognition. So when you're consuming stuff to hide it, what's the pattern? Interference. That's all it is. So we recognize it doesn't work, but why do we keep doing it? Because if I don't know what a integrative pattern looks like, I still have to be stuck in the pattern cycle. So, okay, I'm still living. So at least if I'm doing something that's not working, at least I'm doing something. And that's how we are, because you can't be annihilated out of this life. But when you actually, because I think if people let go of the pattern that isn't working, they feel they'll be annihilated. I'm like, you won't. You'll just slip into another pattern. The next pattern might not work either. But we're really good. And the thing is, even an alcoholic knows they shouldn't be drinking, but they're stuck in the pattern because the fear of letting go and just going within and seeing what's going on inside is too scary that they'll risk their liver giving out and dropping dead at an early age. They'll risk that because they don't realize just going within, the only thing scary about it is the unknown, period. It's a beautiful crystalline pattern. And once you see this cohesive pattern, it's like, wow, you would never go and intentionally go into a pattern that was interfering anymore. You might slip into it. I do it all the time, but now I notice it and get the hell out of it. Yeah. But I still do the same things. I still watch TV. I still eat. I still have sex. I once in a while I'll drink. I don't drink a lot, and that has nothing to do with anything else other than, it's not part of my pattern. But I don't knock it. Like people that drink celebratory, it doesn't seem to affect them. But if you're drinking to forget you're weak, I'm like, yeah, that's an interference pattern. That's one that continuously breaks up. So I'm never for abstinence because that is just another interference pattern that will end up biting you in the ass at the end. Next thing you know, you find yourself in the cupboard eating all the cookies and candy because you couldn't have it all week.
Yep. Well, that's what the mind does. The mind is like, it says, okay, if I am having too much of this, I got to go the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Abstinence is the only way. And we play this game with ourselves where if it's not this way, then it has to be fully the other way. There's no sense of neutrality or, walking it that line in the middle.
And psychologists call that bipolar.
Yeah.
And if it's not working, it's called bipolar disorder.
Well, and what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results.
Yeah.
I mean, by definition, we are insane and bipolar nation walking around going, what's wrong? It's funny.
It is. But once we start to recognize that pattern, that's when we can let go. And listen to someone like Ty here, Thich Nhat Hanh, will let you know that it's possible. If you just sit and listen to him, don't even attempt to do the practice. Just listen to his videos or any audio part of it. And all of a sudden, you'll find yourself relaxed. It's almost like he's singing a lullaby, like your mom or dad did when you were a kid going to sleep. You don't even know the words. Sometimes they just hummed it. But it's the essence of his tone. Even if he was speaking his native language and you only understood English, it would still resonate. Don't attach too much to the words, but just the essence of how he talks. And then try to mimic that. Try to, because, I was telling Mike earlier, like I'll be sitting in the house and Karen will be talking. And I'm not really paying attention because we're in the same room, but I'm not really focused. And she'll just come out and start talking. And I could tell right away whether she's happy or upset, right? And once in a while, I was like, are you listening? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, you sound like you're really happy. And just, I'm like, cross my fingers that she doesn't say, what did I say? Because I can't repeat it. I'm like, I wasn't paying attention to words. I was paying attention to the essence of who she was saying. And then I could also understand, almost like a alarm goes off when I could tell she's not happy or something's going on because, okay, I better pay attention because it's going to be a test at the end of this thing.
Yep.
But there is an essence of it. And you know that. Like I could watch somebody playing in a playground and can't hear a damn thing they're saying, but I know they're happy. Yeah. And, I could see someone sitting there too by the field of energy and you could see they're miserable. And I have no idea what they're thinking to a degree.
It's funny how that works. You're totally
Yeah.
right. I think all our listeners at home too can
Yeah.
agree with that. This is what I always kind of share with people. You know, how do you deny something like energy and write that off as something woo woo or something that, you know, that's not factual, when you can walk into a room and know, you know, if people have been fighting. You can everybody's experienced that, walking into a situation where like, whoa, you know, I can cut the tension in here with a knife. You know, there's a reason that saying exists. Energy is a very real thing.
Yeah.
And you know, ask anybody that. Have you ever walked in a room and you can tell if somebody's been fighting? You know, same thing with love. You know, there is no Richter scale or scale out there that can show someone, or you can test how much you love someone or something. But we have all experienced love, and we know that love exists. But if I were to ask you, you know, show me how much you love your mother, how are you going to show me love? You can't. And so we live in this Western world of things that are, if they can't be measured, they don't exist. Well, how is something like that possible when we all have experienced love? We all know what love is, but we can't measure it. We can't prove it.
We can only express it.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of different examples like this. And the more that we touch on that, the more we kind of like ease into it and allow ourselves to understand and feel.
Yeah, to some degree though, we are coming to a place where, like, if you read the book Power versus Force, David Hawkins, where he does have kinetic energy, a way to, through the subconscious mind, through muscle testing, and he set up the field of energy. So, like, I think it was 1 through 1,000, right? 1,000 being like Buddha, Christ setting. Obviously, 1 being so deep into the dark, you're like, you know,
Yep.
You're at the devil. And I think 200 is the basis of what we call positivity. So what's 200? It'd be like, you know, waking up, things are going good. You drink a cup of coffee. It's not raining outside. You feel good. So as we elevate up, and even this guy, Dr. David Hawkins, he would go into buildings that were structured, say, you know, 500 years ago, and was able to measure the energy, how it was built. Like, what was the intention behind it? Was it dark, or was it for good?
Mm-hmm.
And so that stands. Now, the thing about humans, different than what we call a physical structures, we're a walking temple. We can change. You know, I could be measured today and change my whole outlook tomorrow and be completely different.
Absolutely.
So, like, you walk into a room, it's all, you know, it's all filled with hatred. You yourself begin that walking temple to change that. You can go in there and change. You can clear that room of that energy, because we are walking temples. And that's what we talk, you know, Thich Nhat Hanh talks about that as his walking meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So we are the temple, and we walk into it, and then we notice people around us, things around us. Because when I listen to people like him and numerous other people, just the second I hear their voice, all of a sudden I fall into the state. And it's amazing. I'm like, you know, I've never met the person. You know, I never met him in person, but I've been listening to him for years. And it's like this, it's like, yeah, it's like, you know, when you're older and someone sings a lullaby and you hadn't heard since you were a child, you go right back into that state. That's the state of love. That's the state of joy. That's the state of peace. And he has that frequency in his voice. He lives it. He breathes it. He reminds us that it exists, you know? Yeah.
Great points. Let's jump into the next clip.
All right, here's an interesting clip. All right.
In the 70s, one day I got very angry because I received a letter from a refugee camp in Thailand, that an 11-year-old girl, after was raped by separate, and his father tried to intervene to protect him, and then the separate threw him into the ocean. And during the 70s, news like that come every day. We were trying to help boat people. Many of them stay in refugee camps in Thailand, in Malaysia, and in Indonesia. You get angry at the sea pirate who threw the, who rape the 11-year-old. And after being raped, after having seen her father drown, and she also jumped into the ocean to get drowned. You get angry at the pirate. You get angry to the point that you cannot eat. And you know that you have to do something in order to transform your anger. Otherwise you cannot eat, you cannot sleep, you cannot continue to help people. So I went for walking meditation to calm myself down. And that night during sitting meditation, I saw the pirate. And that is the practice of visualization. If you are born in a very poor fishing family, if your father has not had any chance to go to school, your mother also, and then you have been poor for many generations, and you have never got a chance to get out of that chronic situation of chronic poverty. And when you are 13, your father asks you to go with him to the sea, and you have to do very hard work. And yet, when your father died, you continue his career as a fisherman. But you cannot do better than him. You're still in chronic poverty. And one day another fisherman said, well, the boat people, when they flee the country, they always bring with them some valuable gold and diamonds and things like that. Because they left the country and they want to start a new life in another country. So if we go out just one time, we can get enough in order to get out of this chronic situation of chronic poverty. And many young men became pirates because of that. In the high sea, there was no policeman. And you see young girls, and you know that you will not be punished. So the young fishermen just did like other fishermen. They rope, they rape. If you are on a boat, what can you do? If you try to intervene, they will throw you into the ocean. And if you have a gun, what would you do? Of course, you will shoot the sea pirate. That sea pirate might be just 21 years old or 22. And I saw that in my meditation. Suppose I was born in the coast, along the coastline of Thailand 24 years ago, into a family like his, My father was very poor. My mother did not have any education. I was raised like that. No one. I did not go to this. I have no chance to go to school. I became a young poor fisherman. Nobody has taught me to love, to be responsible. Nobody has helped me to get out of my situation of chronic poverty. And another fisherman came to me and persuaded me to go out in order to meet the boat people, in order to take the gold, to take the diamonds. And there I went. And I would have done exactly what the young parents have done, because I have had no education. I did not know how to love, to be responsible, so I did exactly what he did. And if you shoot me, I die. I simply die, because no one has helped me in my 21 years of life. So when I meditated, at that point, I identified myself with the poor fisherman. I saw him as a victim of society. It's really no one has tried to help him, his family. No one has tried to educate him, to teach him how to be responsible, to love. And when I saw that, my anger just evaporated. And suddenly I have a lot of compassion.
Wow.
That's a powerful clip.
This kind of goes along the idea of before the grace of God goes I. I've heard other people talk about this, tell that story, like if you really want to change the world. And I've heard this a number of times, so I'm not going to name the people that said it, but like they'll be at a conference and they'll talk about somebody and says, okay, if you were like 17 years old, 16, 17 years old, and you lived in Austria in like the late 30s, would you have joined the Nazi party? And a lot of people in the audience say no. And then what's presented to them is like, you're lying to yourself. By admitting you would is the only way we could change the world. Because you think you were better than them, but these kids had no choice in the way they thought. They were subject to that thinking. So when he put himself in that position of, if I was that pirate and I was raised that way, I would have done the same thing. That's the most honest thing a human being could present. Where for him, he was raised differently. So he went a different route. But he couldn't judge the pirate, and therefore his anger dissipated. And in the moment when the anger dissipates, this is when solutions come. We don't mean tolerating it. And it was so brilliantly said, and I've heard this so many times. When I first heard this type of idea, I was like, you got to be out of your mind. But now I get it, you know. And if other people there are saying, I don't understand it, I'm like, just keep that in the back of your head. There's something precious about that understanding. That is pure forgiveness. It doesn't mean we condone the act, put up with it. But in this moment is when we find the solution. And, this is why we're trying to get rid of world poverty, because poverty brings amongst us these harsh things against other human beings.
Yeah.
They do. If you can go get a job and make money, you're not going to have to kill somebody for it. So.
Or rob somebody, like you were saying in this, They're we're put in these different positions, and to say that, we would or would not react a certain way, it's funny because it's like, is that true,
Well, yeah, because I go look back at my life when I was a kid and hanging out with your friends, and you get stuck in this mob mentality.
Yeah.
And I had done things that I probably wouldn't have done if I wasn't influenced at the time, but I did them. And I recognized they didn't work. They were no good. I shouldn't have done that. But I've learned, okay, how do I recognize this next pattern? By bringing it back to my body. It doesn't feel good. Well, then go in the opposite direction. Where before, I don't want to look bad, went against how I felt. And I didn't want to look bad in front of my friends, in front of the people, and wherever I was. So I went along with it, and then just had to suffer the pain of it. Because even the pirate who raped the 11-year-old child is not living a free, happy life. They're miserable. You know, it's a cancer-ridden individual. But that's all they knew. It's all they knew.
And that's what Thich's talking about when he says, there is no education. There's no love.
Well, there's no love, yeah.
And, and I liked how he, also mentioned, like, if we were to just shoot the pirate, the pirate just dies. And in my opinion, what he was getting at was, yeah, we can take the life away, but we never taught the person. We never taught the soul. We never taught the awareness, the lesson. That soul, that awareness that never learned, the compassion. It never learned the love. It never understood what it was doing.
Yeah.
And that right there is the true loss, because there's no way for that soul, to come back, And,
well, the soul probably has an opportunity to come back a different way, but just in
of
right
course,
now,
not incarnation. I just mean the soul must now come back.
Yeah.
It never had an opportunity to resolve that and go back to source,
Yeah.
And this is why we continue to incarnate.
Well,
is we die and we don't learn the lesson.
Yeah. But even in that situation, say you shot the pirate, his buddy would then bear down and look at, okay, if you can shoot someone to kill someone, why can't I?
Mm-hmm.
You're actually becoming the pirate by killing the pirate. Yeah. You don't realize you're actually doing what the pirate did, and you're condemning the pirate for what you just did. You all of a sudden, like, wow, we're in a dilemma with this situation, because hatred, like, I understand, like, if someone did something to my child, would have thoughts of, doing something, another human being, and I would be lying to say if I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But that wouldn't resolve anything. I know that it's an interference pattern. Well, how do we overcome that? Like, okay, that's what we're working on right now. That's what perspective shift's about.
Exactly.
We don't have the answers. They're out there. The answer will only come in the moment in which you need it. But the more we go into the body, the more we stay present. It seems like you flow through this life, almost like in the movie Matrix, and the bullet's coming at you. You can't move out of the way until it comes. If you try to move out of one bullet, the other bullet will hit you. You actually move out of the way of the one bullet that's coming towards you. And when you're in this peaceful place, the bullets slow down.
Yeah.
And so it's a state, not an answer you're looking for. And in that state, the answer is there. The solution's there. But you have to get in that state to see it. Otherwise, the state of interference pattern has nothing but interference patterns. You could take an upstanding citizen and turn him into a criminal overnight in the interference pattern. And we see that over and over. I'm like, okay, what do we need to change? More laws? No. I'm not knocking laws, but they don't seem, we have the first. Well, I think one of the first laws on the books was do not kill or murder, right? That doesn't help. People still murdering, right? So the law doesn't. It adds consequence, so maybe less people are murdering, perhaps. But it's like, I'd kill that person, but I don't want to spend my life in jail. Mm-hmm. You mean you would kill them if you didn't spend your life in jail? Yeah, perhaps. I don't know. Obviously there is a connection with that. I'm not taking away from that, but there's something deeper that we have to look at. And I think we're at this moment in human history where, you have a lot of individuals out there, like Ty here, talking about that and bring it to our awareness. These are the solutions, and they're working. They don't work quickly. It's a process, just like everything. We didn't come here to get to, everyone's trying to get everything done. Well, it's like, okay, when you're done, it equates to you leaving this earth. I'm like, well, at the same time, everyone's trying to get something done and keeping themselves young at the same time. That's kind of an oxymoron. It really is. You're trying to race through life, but I want to slow it down. Just be present. It'll do both for you.
It's funny you bring that up. That reminds me, I wrote down a quote from Thich that I wanted to share on this episode, and this is perfect timing. But one of the quotes that I liked that he said was, "Many of us have been running our whole lives. Try stopping." And I thought that was so eye-opening, because that is the truth. We're all running you know, whether that's to complete something, get something, be something. We never try to just stop.
Yeah.
You know, we never just try to be, you know, that. It's always a chase, and it's in the chase that things get further and further away from us. We don't talk enough about this electromagnetic universe that we live in, but we're magnets, you know. That's how we experience life, and we call it real. You know, we understand, you know, everything's made out of 99.999% space, but it feels real. I can touch this table, but what's actually happening is it's magnetism. You know, it's a repel. Like you push two magnets together, and you can feel them push apart, and that's kind of like what's going on here. We're chasing everything and pushing it further and further away from us, rather than just being and allowing that to come to us.
We're trying to run away from it, but yet, like if you're a magnet, it's pulling all the files with you.
Yeah.
So next thing you know, when you look at your back, everything's there. So why run? Why not enjoy the files?
Mm-hmm.
The filings, like, you know, look at lead filings type of thing. Yeah, that was the scene in Forrest Gump.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, like, he had a bad time in his life, and he started running.
Yeah.
And then one day he's like, I stopped. It's like, I'm done. Just like that. And that story there shows you how quickly you can turn. And I'm done. Why? I'm just done. Because run, it will show you that pattern doesn't work. It distracts you, by all means. And I'm not talking about anyone out there that's jogging. That's an expression of life. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the actual mind running. And in the story of Forrest Gump, he actually was physically running around the planet or the world or the country or whatever. But and then one day he just decided he was done, just like that. And he stopped running. And that was a metaphor of his mind stopped racing. It just came to a calm, peaceful place. And he was no longer searching or chasing. He just was. And this is home. This is what we're all looking for at the end of the day, in the beginning of the morning, any part of the day. And we're searching it through food. But once you find it, all of a sudden, what you do is just an expression of it. So you enjoy the food. Doesn't mean you don't eat. You enjoy the sex. Doesn't mean you don't have sex. But it's a different value to it. It's completely different. And you can't even fully explain it through expression. It's like, how do you explain art to somebody? Well, we can attempt it. I can explain the technique, but not why I use the technique to get this. It just came out of me. It's just an expression. And that's what we're expressive beings. And we understand patterns that work, that are congruent, and we understand patterns that are interfering. But we're scared to go from an interference pattern to one that is congruent and that works, that's cohesive and building. Because we think in the interim of switching, we'll let go and we'll fall into the abyss. You won't. Give it a try. Give it a try. Yeah.
I love that. Well, we got another clip. This one's our last one for today, so we'll put this one on. This is I like this clip, and so I think this kind of captures the essence of what, Thich's been getting at.
The 14th has to do with our idea of happiness. And many of us believe wrongly that our happiness, our true happiness, is made of objects of craving, like money, wealth, fame, power, sex, and so on. We believe that happiness is possible only when we are able to buy anything we want to buy. Happiness is possible when we have a lot of power, a lot of fame. A lot of sex. But we know that there are those who have plenty of these things. They suffer very deeply. They even commit suicide. Look at some of them. They destroy the body, the mind, the life, running after these objects of craving. as far as power is concerned, how much power do we need in order to be happy? Well, if you hold the office of the President of the United States of America, you think that you have enough power to do anything you like. Ask the President. He will tell you. He needs more power. So, when we look at the object of our craving, we have to see the danger in it. And if you can see the danger of self-destruction in the object of our craving, we will be released, we will be free, and our happiness is made of freedom. A fish may like to bite at the bait if she does not know that inside of the bait there is a hook. If she bites and then she will be hooked up and lose her life. So the object of craving has the hook inside, and we have to see the danger of self-destruction in that object of craving. And only after we have got the insight that we can be free from it. Otherwise, it continues to run after. And according to this teaching and practice, conditions of happiness are already available and more than enough for you to be happy. You don't have to run after anything else. It is possible to live more simply and happy right here and right now.
Well said.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
it kind of encapsulates everything we've been talking about on this week's episode.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because I think a lot of times we look at the outside world, we're always searching out there for happiness. And what happens is you gain it for a moment, but what you gain is this distraction from what we think of as our problems, and then something happens, you fall in, and the veil lifts a little bit, and love comes in, or oneness comes in. And then it goes away, and you think, okay, I need more of that to feel that. And I'm like, it was never that. It was a mere distraction from your problem. So the quickest route is to go within and realize what you think is a problem is not. And then the veil will stay open. And then it will close periodically, rather than it opens a little bit. Most of the times it's closed. And that's when you search in the outside world. When you put the cart in front of the horse, that's a very difficult life. But when you learn to put the horse in front of the cart, you'll get caught up in little disturbances, but you're flipping the coin. So now you're mostly at peace. And when you get distracted, you fall out of it. But then you notice it and you get right back into it.
Yeah.
It's just turning. It's so subtle. That's why it seems difficult for us to understand, because it's both components are in it, right? Like I said this before, climbing the tree didn't make me happy. My happiness inclined me to climb the tree. Yeah. It made me want to climb the tree. But if I'm mistaken, says, well, climbing a tree made me happy, like how many trees, so now I'm not happy, I'm going to go conquer the woods to climb a tree. I'm just going to end up with a bunch of splinters. And if I get upset enough, I'll chop the damn thing down and not let anyone else climb a tree ever again. Because if I can't be happy, I don't want them to be happy. But it had nothing to do with the tree, although there's a correlation with the tree. It was the expression of my happiness. It wasn't the happiness.
I like where you're going with that. One of my favorite things about this clip in particular is how he mentions, there's great examples of those out there with everything, all the riches in the world, etc., that still aren't happy. And we talk about this often on the show. You can see examples of this all across, celebrities, media, etc. It's funny, like an example that jumps into my head is Robin Williams, right? Everybody loves his movies, and he was hilarious. He was such a great actor, you know, and he was so funny. Never would you think after watching one of that man's movies that, you know, he was depressed, you know, hated life, in fact, committed suicide.
He was tortured,
you know, and I mean, he had plenty of money, you know, and on screen, he was the funniest person you could ever see. But there was so much pain behind that. And, you know, and hearing his story, you know, about how he committed suicide, that shows us that, like, there's no craving out there that's going to be satisfied, you know, through consumption, like he's talking about here. It's not in the act of achieving. And so I look at that, and it's a great reminder for me. And then he also brings up the president of the United States, right? We're all on this power trip. I got to be the boss. So I got to be the owner. I got to be this. And and he brings up the president, you know, like, okay, the most powerful person in the United States is going to be the president, right? And even them, you know, you'll listen to them and you'll hear multiple past presidents say this, you know, I need more power. You know, I can't get anything done because I can't get the House and the Senate to agree, you know, I need more power, etc. And that's the most powerful person, quote unquote, you know, in the U.S. And so it's not power we're after either. And I think that's what he explains so brilliantly here.
Well, that becomes a great illusion of power.
Yeah.
Because there is great power in the world.
Of course.
But it doesn't come from force. It comes from just, you know, what's one of the most powerful substances on the planet is water, and water always finds the lowest point in anything. Mm-hmm. You don't see a lake on the top of a mountain. You see it in the valley. So when we become that powerful, we actually sit back and take no credit, no accreditations. We just support. And that's the greatest power, support into something. The foundation of a building is the basement. It's the most powerful part of the building, by the way. But everyone wants to live in the penthouse. Nothing wrong with that either. But if you don't have a powerful basement, you don't have a building. Mm-hmm. So we start to look at it that way. So why do we want to get to the top? Why do we want to get here? Well, it's an experience. I get that. But it doesn't make the top of the building isn't any more experiential than the basement. It's just different. It's completely different.
That's what we have to remind ourselves of.
Yeah, so go be the president of something. It'll teach you something. Doesn't mean don't stop doing it, but it'll teach you something. But if you think that's going to grant you power, you're mistaken. You know, Marcus Aurelius, you know, back in the days of the Roman emperor, you know, you're assigned pretty much where appointed. And it's not a job I think he ever really wanted. And, you know, and he's what we understand of the philosophy of Stoicism. He wrote this book called Meditations. And from what I understood, the book was never supposed to be published, but it was. He didn't want it. But he lived this Stoic life. He realized he wasn't the most powerful person. He was just like any other person. He lived that way. But he also realized he had a sense of duty to the Roman Empire. So he acted as if, and he did, you know. But then his son, who was hunger for power, became one of the most vicious Roman emperors of the Roman Empire. It's like his son was crazy. Mm-hmm. So here's like within 2 generations, one person just living a Stoic life and taking the part of, okay, I'm running this place, I'm running Rome, I'm running the Roman Empire. I have a duty, but it's not the power I seek. It's the fairness, the justice of it. And it was run, and he's one of the 5 great Roman emperors. And then the next generation, his son was so hungry because his probably son looked at his dad as everyone loved him. They loved him because he wasn't trying to be better than them. But he mistaken that love for him into, I'm going to get more power than my dad. They're going to love me even more. And he became very vicious, and he became one of the most hated Roman emperors of all time. So these are, that's why it's so subtle. And we have to go within and check ourselves. Am I crossing the line on this subtlety? And I do it all the time, but now I recognize it, and I pull back, and it's a game, or it's a play we're having, and I just got to recognize that. Yeah.
One of the things that I figured I want to bring up on this episode too, just through researching, take this last week and reading about him, So as you guys know, he was a Buddhist monk, and one of the one of my favorite teachings and one of my favorite things about Buddhism that was never explained or acknowledged to me growing up is the first noble truth of Buddhism, which is life is suffering. And for some reason in our culture growing up, we are not taught that suffering is part of life. We are not taught that suffering is present, in normal everyday reality. In fact, we're told that if we're feeling suffering, that something outside of us is causing it, and that it is wrong, and that we can avoid suffering by purchasing different things, by having enough power, by by ultimately, overcome, by achieving something. Like we are taught that suffering is something that if you are experiencing it, that is incorrect and you shouldn't feel that way. And this is what Western culture went wrong, in my opinion, is we don't acknowledge suffering as a normal part of existence, or that it's normal to feel that way, and that it, you can overcome this. We look at it as if suffering is something you need to write a prescription for, or you need to earn enough money to overcome, or you need to achieve more in order to escape. And that's not what suffering is. Suffering can be found in all elements. You can be the richest person in the world. You don't think Jeff Bezos still suffers? Of course he does. He has moments of suffering. We all do. But we're not taught that this is a part of life. We're not taught that duality exists. We're not taught, that the pendulum will swing. And so anytime we experience suffering, we go on this chase for more money, more power, a different situation, whatever, to avoid the suffering. We never become one with the suffering. We're never, like Thich said in the previous clip or 2 clips ago, we don't hold the suffering like a mother holds its child and we say, hey, it's okay, I'm going to allow myself to feel this. We don't do that. We try to run as far as we can away from suffering. And I think that is one of the most important things that I took away from Buddhism and helped me look at the world in a different light. I needed to stop trying to avoid suffering. I needed to acknowledge it and understand that it's a part of life.
Yeah. Well, in the West, we did talk about that because you look at the ideal of Christianity and Christ and taking suffering away from us. So, but then you had the Trinity, and we experience the world in duality, but it's actually a Trinity. So when you step back from duality, suffering dismisses or is relieved, and that's what on the third day Christ risen to heavens. Buddhists talk about the same thing. We just didn't emphasize it. So, and even the suffering is once you know you're suffering, you're no longer suffering. So suffering is able to be eliminated. But when you're playing the game of duality, you're going to suffer. I could come up with a great argument for a point and say the point is for this. Well, my mind will easily find a point for the other side because the only way I can find a point that's so great here, tomorrow I'm going to beat it on that side, and I play ping pong in my own mind and I become a suffering fool. But when I step back and realize it's just my thoughts eating themselves, I'm witnessing my thoughts, I'm no longer suffering. So there is a place where you transcend this and be seated at the right hand of the Father, as they say. But we were told this, but we were never shown how to live it. And I'm starting to do it. But perhaps, Buddha came 600 years before Christ. Maybe we're catching up. Mm-hmm. But what Christ said was no different than Buddha, no different than Muhammad, no different than Moses. It was just worded differently. And if we live by these things and trust it, our life starts to change. And one of the ways we trust it is by working in the field of interference patterns. Like, well, that's not working. Well, we know it's not working. So let's let go of it. But I'm scared to let go of it. Well, let go and see what happens, right? I was telling Mike a story. This happened when I was a kid. Me and my buddy were out swimming at the beach. And we went out, on the Atlantic Ocean. I grew up in Long Island, so it tapers, it tapers slowly as you go out. So you have to go out pretty far to get really deep. Well, there must have been a riptide. So the bottom just dropped out for me and my buddy. And was swimming, and next thing I was getting tired, so I go to swim in, and the shoreline looked about like 50 yards away. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it. And he's like right next to me swimming. And for some reason, like I literally in my mind, I wasn't screaming because like I'm like, I'd rather drown than scream for a freaking. This is how sick I was. I'd rather drown than scream for a lifeguard. You know,
That's how conditioned
I don't want to be
we are.
yeah. Like
That's all it
I'm
is.
going down with the ship.
Yep.
So I'm swimming, and I'm like, my head. I'm like, I'm gonna fucking drown. You
Yeah.
know. Next thing you know, my buddy who's right next to me standing up, and we're in 2 foot of water. Didn't even know it. And I'm
Yep.
like swimming, thinking I was gonna die, but I didn't realize I was already where I needed to be to stand up. But the illusion, because I was in a different position, I was parallel to the sand rather than perpendicular. But yet my mind, I thought I was going to drown, but yet the situation I was in, like, no, you know,
Just
I could have drowned in 2 foot of water. Anyone could do that, but I didn't need to. I wasn't in, 30 foot of water at that time. I was in 2 foot of water. And and when I discovered that, I started laughing. Because for one, my friend was making fun of me. He was like, "Wait, get up." I'm like, "You ass, you just discovered it yourself. It's not like you knew about it. We could have passed that. We could have started standing up maybe 30 strokes ago. We don't know." But it was a funny moment because I realized, let go. You're going to be okay. Let go. And in that moment, I let go to realize the idea of I'm going to drown. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. But it's scared of letting go of those old patterns, thinking something else worse is going to come. I'm like, what could be worse than this pattern of interference? Let go. See what happens.
That story that you shared too is such a great example of what this life is, because it's us holding ourselves down,
Yeah, the suffering went on in my head, not my reality wasn't suffering, but what was going on in my head was. So I'm aware of my reality.
And it feels very real.
Yeah. So in the story with, Thich Nhat Hanh talked about that, about the mother holding the baby. All of a sudden, the suffering dissipated, and there was no suffering. Suffering is running from the scream of the child. But holding the baby, all of a sudden, the suffering dissipates. It disappears. So when you understand life is suffering, you no longer suffer. It's kind of a quandary there, but it really makes sense. I think the book, The Road Less Traveled, states that in the beginning of the book, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it said, once you know you're going to suffer in life, you no longer suffer. Those aren't the exact words, but it's the same thing that Mike just brought up. But once we know that, in the Buddhist thing, they're coming to that place, well, if I know life is suffering, what is suffering? It dissipates. Oh, interesting. Because we say, if this happens, this is suffering. Well, how do I know this is suffering over a difference? Yes, we do have preferences. We know that. But my preferences are only stood out by other things of other choices. That's it. But those other things aren't bad. They're making my preference stand out so I can express it. I can use it. There's a different way of looking at it. There's multitudes of ways of looking at this. But just, if you can, just peer into this way of looking at it and see what happens to your life.
I thought this was a great episode.
Yeah.
I learned a lot studying Thich Nhat Hanh this week, and he's got a lot out there, guys, that you can listen to personally too.
Yeah.
He started, what was it called? The Plum Village.
Yeah, Plum Village, yeah.
Yeah, so he has different teachings online that you can go to, access, listen back. There's actually other, different monks that he has worked with and taught who also speak on these, same type of concepts, and they're part of the Plum Village series. And, there's just a lot of good stuff. And not only, like Frank mentioned, did he leave behind a bunch of different books, but his teachings are living through, each of those monks that, he came in and interacted with, Yeah. His teachings are living through Frank and I right now through this discussion. And that's what's so cool about, this energy that each of us carries. Each of us has a specific energy frequency. And we're carrying that of Thich Nhat Hanh's, energy frequency across the radio waves to you guys today.
Well said, Mike. Well said.
So it's exciting. Thank you guys for tuning into this week's episode. If you liked what you heard, please click the link to subscribe below. We'll be back next week with some more information.
Yeah. So check it out and have a great day, all right?
Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Peace out.
We'll see you soon.
All right.